Okay, so I am back to your class. In this couple of lectures, I will give you an overview of robot motion planning methods. This is one of the three advanced topics that I outlined in the beginning of the course. So after discussing the basic problem itself, we will talk about the mathematical formulation and then the three families of methods: roadmap, cell decomposition, and potential field methods. And then we will talk about the possible extensions of the basic problem and how they are handled. This we will keep to a very brief extent. Okay. So first, what is the problem of robot motion planning? The basic problem is this. We have a rigid object, single object, rigid, which we will call as the robot, the geometry of which is known. And this robot, in the basic problem, is capable of freely moving in a region of space, which is the workspace. And in that region of space, there are some other fixed rigid objects called obstacles. And these obstacles also are of known geometry and known location. They are fixed and their location is known. Okay, and they are rigid and their geometry is known. So this is the simplest possible robot motion planning problem. And this itself can be quite complicated. So as you decode this single sentence, what you get and what problem you define, given initial position and orientation of the robot in the workspace, and the final, that is goal, position and orientation of the robot in the workspace, you need to generate a path specifying a continuous sequence of positions and orientations of the robot, which will avoid contact with the obstacles, basically collision with the obstacles. And it has to start at the initial given position and orientation, terminate at the goal position and orientation. If such a path is possible, then the problem is to find the path. And if such a path is not possible, then the method can point out that no path exists between these two initial pose and final pose. Okay, so report failure if no such path exists. And this is important because when you study methods, you find that there are two kinds of methods. One kind cannot say this with confidence. Even if the program has been implemented properly, still the failure to find a path may not mean for every method the non-existence of a path. So such methods which may give you a path when it succeeds, but when it does not succeed, then it cannot tell you clearly that no path exists. It cannot make a claim. Such methods are called incomplete methods. And then there are more sophisticated methods, which, if there is a path, will always find it. Okay. So such methods are called complete methods. So we will come across both kinds of methods. Now, to solve that problem, how do we mathematically formulate it? So path planning involves collision avoidance. And therefore, to begin with, we need a spatial representation of the workspace, its obstacles, and the robot. So you have a workspace, a region in space, in which, this is an example, or you can also call schematic, but not exactly schematic, it is an example. So each obstacle covers some space. So that you can denote as WOI of obstacle I. So such obstacle spaces you can put together of all the obstacles, then that space is the obstacle space. The remaining part will be free. And for the robot, you need a reference point to describe its motion properly. Okay, so say this thick dot is the reference point of this robot. And if orientation is of importance, then other than the thick point, you will need a line in the body. Okay, I mean line attached to the body to show the description. So that line attached to the body will act as the reference of the orientation. Now the robot has infinite points in it. The full robot sitting there. Okay, it's not a particle, it's a rigid body. So when you describe the configuration of a robot, you try to give the values of a few parameters so that from that the complete specification of the position of all points of the robot is clear. So in this particular case, that will mean the position of one point and orientation of one line in it. Okay. So that much will describe the configuration properly, because with the help of that, you can find out the location of every other point in the robot. Now, all such configurations together constitute what is known as the configuration space or C space. And you denote it with by this Q, capital Q, big Q. Actually, it is a calligraphic Q. So small q is a configuration, and the set of all such configurations, colliding or not colliding, all possible, all that you can think of. Okay, that is the configuration space, capital Q. Okay. And R of Q is the Cartesian space occupied by the robot in the Cartesian space, in the ordinary space. Okay. And Q is the configuration in the configuration space where it is a point. And how it is a point, we will see. Now, dimension of the C space, dimension of the configuration space is usually the number of degrees of freedom. In how many degrees of freedom that robot can move, that body can move, that is typically the dimension of the configuration space. Let us see how it works. Say this robot itself we consider, for which if we describe, if we can give these three values, x1 coordinate and y1 x coordinate and y coordinate of this point, and this angle from a reference direction, angle of this line attached to the robot from this reference direction in the space, in the workspace. So if you specify this angle also apart from x1, y1, then for planar motion, you have described the robot completely. With the help of x1, y1 and phi1, you can locate every point in the robot in the planar region, in the space, in the workspace. And therefore, this vector x1, y1, phi1, you call as configuration q1. Now you see, in this space, in this plot, 3D plot, x, y, and phi, if you plot in these three directions, then this configuration will be represented with x equal to x1, y equal to y1, sorry, y equal to y1 here, and phi equal to phi1. So it will be a point, right? So x1, y1, phi1 together will be a point. So the robot configuration gets described by a point in the C space. And that is why the C space analysis is typically directly sensible. Because if you are interested in planning the path from one initial configuration to one final configuration, in the C space, in this space, it will basically mean joining one point and another point through a continuous curve. And the design of the curve is what you need to do. And you have to ensure that on the way that curve does not try to go through something which is forbidden. And what is forbidden? The obstacles. So the obstacles for which we have the ordinary description in the Cartesian space, those obstacles also then have to be described in the C space, if not explicitly, then at least implicitly. Okay. So this implicit description is like this. Obstacles description in the configuration space. You define a region in the configuration space as a C obstacle QOI, that is the C obstacle induced by obstacle I. That is the mapping of the obstacle I into the C space. And this will be basically done by taking the set of all configurations at which the robot collides or intersects with the obstacle I. Suppose you propose a configuration Q for the robot, and in that configuration Q, in actual Cartesian space, the robot collides with some obstacle, say obstacle I. Then you say this particular configuration, that means this particular point in the C space, belongs to C obstacle of I. Okay. So all such points which belong to that C obstacle, together the region that you define there in the Q space, in the C space, that is the C obstacle or configuration space obstacle. So the mathematical definition would be this. QOI is the set of all those configurations for which the region occupied by the robot in the configuration and the obstacle space of obstacle I have a non-null intersection. Okay, so that means when they intersect, when their intersection is not null, there is some non-trivial intersection. Then you say that this point is in the QOI and the set of all such configurations is the QOI. And when you take the union of all such QOI, that is all such C obstacles, then in the C space you have mapped all the obstacles. And from the C space, the entire space Q, as you subtract, this is set theoretic difference, as you subtract that, then what remains is called Q free. Okay, so Q free is that subset of the C space Q which in which every configuration is one in which the robot is not colliding with anybody. Okay. So in path planning, you basically need to plan the path in Q free. Now, let us find out how we describe that in this simple case. In the simple case, you can explicitly describe it. In complicated cases, you have to manage with the implicit definition. For the simple case, we consider the robot capable of only translation, no rotation. So in this case, phi coordinate will not be there. It is only xy, location of this point. Okay. This is the workspace, this is the obstacle. Now we try to find out which points in the workspace are allowed to this point of the robot and which points are forbidden. For that matter, all the points here will not be allowed to this point because it has to go inside then, which it cannot. Okay. And then the point where the mouse is showing the pointer, okay, that point, even though within the workspace free, but that point is also forbidden for this point of the robot, because if this point of the robot has to reach somewhere here, then part of the robot has to go outside. Okay. Similarly, this point just below the obstacle will not be accessible by this reference point of the robot, because if the reference point comes here, then this corner will go inside it. So let us operate a little systematically to find out what is free and what is prohibited. For that, we take this robot, and with that, we touch this wall as low as possible, and then sweep it like this, then like this, as much as possible, as much as possible. Okay. So we basically explore the boundary, and then as you put it at the bottom, you find that this much is this red little width is not available to this point of the robot. And then you, as you drag it, then till go till this point, and then you will find the reference point is at this corner. So nothing on the right of it is available, nothing above it is available. Now you shift. Till now it was edge edge connection. Now it becomes this direction, top vertex with top edge. Now you sweep it like this. Okay. So everything above this line is not accessible to this point because there is some part of the robot above it. Okay. And then after reaching this end, you say we are stopping because we have reached the end, and in this direction till the end is accessible. Then you come down, come like this, everything is available, and you close the loop. So this little strip near the boundary, near the right boundary and near the top boundary is not available for the reference point of the robot. Okay. Not only that, some more. Because of this obstacle, this strip and this strip will not be available. On this side, everything will be available. Okay. So now you combine the two, only one obstacle and one outer boundary. So two such red strips we have got, and you combine, and you, I mean, of course, every point inside the obstacle also is not accessible. So you include that in this red thing, and then combine with the strip that we found in the boundary, and we find that this red strip and this big red area is not available for the robot to move, and the rest is free space. Okay. And any path has to be planned within this white blank free space. So this is the idea. If you allow rotation, then it will be a 3D space. Okay. In the third dimension, the orientation will come into picture, and basically such pictures for phi equal to 0, which was this case, then phi equal to 5 degrees, phi equal to 10 degrees, phi equal to 15 degrees. If you assemble over layers, then you get the 3D C-space picture. And for every orientation, phi equal to 5 degrees, 10 degree, 15 degree, etc., this picture will change. Okay. So the path planning business will be to find a free path for the robot from an initial configuration Q start to a final configuration Q goal. The path being completely, and this path will be a curve actually, joining Q start and Q goal points in the free space. And this curve has to be in the free space completely. Mathematically, you can describe it as this. Taking a little variable u or t, something, you can think of it as time, but it is actually not time, not necessarily, most of the, in generally, no. And then take for that path parameter u an interval 0 to 1, and you basically need a continuous mapping from this scalar variable interval to q free, such that C0 is q start, C1 is q goal. This could have been other numbers also, not necessary to have 0 and 1, but 0 and 1 is convenient if there is no overriding compulsion to have something else. Now, such a path is called a free path if it makes no contact with any obstacle. Okay, forget about intersection, it does not even contact, it doesn't even touch. On the other hand, it is called a semi-free path if it touches obstacles now and then. I mean, touches some obstacles now and then. I mean, it is allowed to, but does not intersect. And why this classification we make? Because there are some very good methods which operate on the basis of exploring the boundary of an obstacle. So that makes life easy. Okay. And they are essentially paths which in which the robot does contact, touches the obstacle. And they are not a path, not something which should be thrown away. Because there may be applications also in which um, touching is not a problem. Okay. But it should not try to cut through the obstacle. So in some applications, semi-free path is allowed. On the other hand, free path is always allowed. Then some methods operate by finding semi-free paths which contact the obstacles. Okay. And those methods are otherwise useful. Okay. So now you say that, but what if I am using a method which gives me semi-free path, but my application is such which does not allow contact, which demands free path? Even that is very simple. That's not a very great problem. What you do before finding your path, before planning your path, you mathematically try to thicken each obstacle by a little half millimeter. Okay. If you grow the obstacle for computational purposes, half millimeter in every direction, then the modeled obstacle becomes a little bigger compared to the actual one, having a little thin cover all around. And then what you will get from your method as a semi-free path for the actual obstacle will be actually a free path. Okay. So this this distinction is not a very serious one. Okay. You can always get over it by some little trick. Okay. But the methods are, I mean, so far as mathematically it is concerned, there is a fundamental difference between the two ways of operation of the two kinds of methods. So we will be talking about this method giving a free path, this method giving a semi-free path, and such things. Now, we come to the subject matter of actual methods. So the first family of methods that we pick up is a roadmap method. Now, in roadmap, the background is that first you build a roadmap. That is, first you build a network or graph of nodes with connections, which is the roadmap, which is already there. And the connections are between some important points, nodal points. Okay. So that graph is already constructed. Okay. So, I mean, that is the first step to build a roadmap, which connects the length and breadth of the region. Okay. And only prescribed connections, all points you cannot go on exploring in the building of the roadmap because there are infinite points. Okay? So some prescribed connections between specific pairs of endpoints are developed in the beginning. So there is a network now, like this. There is a country in which a lot of roads are there, okay, and you have got road number, I mean, National Highway 1, National Highway 2, National Highway 3, 4, and so on. Okay? So like that, you already have. I mean, those roads were built at some time. Now, when it comes to finding a path from some start point to some goal point, there are three segments of the path planning. In the first segment, which is short segment, you need to find a collision-free path from the start point to some point on the roadmap. Okay? And then the big part of it, the big part of the path will be finding a connection from this point on the roadmap to another point on the roadmap close to the goal. Okay, this will be big part. Okay, and the third part will be a little collision-free path from that point on the roadmap to goal, and that makes actually very simple sense. For example, suppose you need to go with your bicycle from your house in your village to your friend's house in his village, or from your hostel room. I mean, from room you cannot start with bicycle. Okay, now it is walking. Okay, so from your hostel room to your friend's hostel room, when you want to find out, go, then what you do with your bicycle? I mean, in the village problem, with your bicycle, you need to first get a segment of path from your house in the village to the road, okay, which connects the two villages. This is the first segment. Then along the road, you have to get a path. I mean, go this way for 2 kilometers and then take a left turn and then go for another 1.5 kilometers, take another left turn, go for 500 meters, then take a right turn. So all these connections you have to find out along the roadmap. Okay, that is the major part, which is the second part. Okay. And then the third part, at a point, you have to decide that now I have to leave the road because his village is this way. And then you come down through the Kacha road or non-road, okay, through the fields or whatever it is, okay, to reach his house in his village, right? So these are the three segments. Similar situation will be if you are going from your hostel room to your friend's hostel room. So these are the three things. So the first little part and the third little part are the new things, new connections that you have to add, and the major part in between you basically find out through a search along the roadmap which already exists. Okay, so and that search is for you, it is done the way given as directions by your friend, or since you have earlier visited him. Okay, algorithmically that is done by a graph search technique, and these graph search techniques are very common. Okay, they are quite established for more than half a century. Okay, so you represent the roadmap as a non-directed graph. Nodes of the graph are the salient positions, important positions, and edges are paths between such nodes. And in the roadmap, you define the roadmap as union of line segments such that for all Q start in Q free and Q goal in Q free, there exist such three segments. A path from Q start to Q start prime, which is in roadmap, and then a path from Q goal prime to which is in roadmap to Q goal, and another path from the between the 2 points in the RM. That is a point Q start prime, which is close to Q start, and the other Q goal prime, which is close to Q goal. Between these two, there is a path completely in RM. Okay, these two little paths are not in the RM to begin with, and that is why when you start with from a point Q start or try to terminate at a point Q goal, which are already not in the roadmap, then for that little problem, for that query, for that particular path planning problem, you put one node at Q start and one node at Q goal and add these two little segments in the existing graph, and then over that you do the entire business. Okay. This part you should be able to find out in the roadmap itself. So this is how most roadmap methods work. I mean, all roadmap methods work. Now, how to build the roadmap? On what basis roadmaps are built? That is the major problem for us. Because the graph search algorithm is already settled, and these three segment planning is common sense. Okay. So how, on what basis the roadmap is built? That is our main issue. And that is where one roadmap method differs from another. Let us see what are those. There are several kinds of roadmap methods which differ in the method of construction of the network. Okay. The shortest path planning is typically done by the usual algorithms of graph theory. The old one was Dijkstra's algorithm. The recent one, even this recent one is perhaps something like 20 years old, which is more efficient. That is called A-star algorithms. A-star algorithm. You can find it almost everywhere in the internet. Okay, and textbook also. So we start with visibility graph as one of the methods of roadmap construction. Visibility graph. It is defined for two-dimensional configuration space only and only for polygonal C obstacles. Now, out of these two limitations, this polygonal C obstacle is not much of a limitation, because if the C obstacle has curved boundaries, then you can always approximate it with a polygonal boundary. Okay, I mean, because it has not been said how many vertices it can have. So polygonal have C obstacle, you can always model with something like 30 vertices, okay, which is essentially a curve. So this is not a big deal. This is a big deal. That is only for two-dimensional configuration spaces it will be useful. So for mobile robots working on a plane, this works quite fine. Okay. So how does it work? It works based on visibility actually, as if obstacles are opaque. Considering obstacles as opaque, if you can connect 2 points without crossing an obstacle, is equivalent to 1 point being visible from the other. So that is why it is called visibility graph. So in the visibility graph, nodes are Q start and Q goal, which will be added later when the query is made. Query means when there is a request to connect one Q start with one Q goal. That is typically a query. Okay? So there are two phases of a method. One is the network building, which is done once. The primary roadmap is built, and the second is query phase, when which is done again and again. For every pair of points, you need a query. Okay. So when you say that the query is typically made that find a path between this point and that point. If both points already belong to the roadmap, then it is just graph search. If the 2 points do not belong to the roadmap already, then those little segments have to be newly connected for that particular query. After that, you can retain it in the network or you can throw it off. Okay. So these two will come in the among the nodes of the visibility graph. Basically, these two have to be added to the primary network, primary roadmap already existing. And already existing will have what? It will have all the vertices of the C obstacles. Okay? All the vertices. And that is why it has to operate with polygonal. Okay? So these are the nodes. Basically, vertices of the C obstacles, and for every query, the Q start and Q goal will be added. So edges. What are the edges? To build the edges, you connect pairs of nodes that are visible from each other. Okay, considering the obstacles as opaque. That means you connect two nodes by an edge if the line segment joining the two nodes does not pass through any obstacle. Okay. So a line segment joining two such nodes does not intersect any obstacle. So EIJ is non-null, that is, there is a connection between I and J nodes if this line segment S times Vi, S times ith vertex plus 1 minus S times jth vertex, if this entire line segment for all S between 0 and 1, this is a line segment, is in Q3. Okay. Then you connect these two edges. And edges of the polygon of the obstacle itself are also taken as edges of the graph, because indeed for a polygon from one vertex to another to the next vertex will be actually visible, which is an edge. It will be visible by just gazing along the C obstacle, okay? Gazing along the side of the polygon. So it is visible. So in that logic, you connect them, and that has a utility also. Okay. So suppose these are three C obstacles, polygonal, and connecting all the vertices to others which are visible, you get this connection, this connection, this connection, but you don't connect this vertex with this vertex because part of it is going through the opaque obstacle. So all these green lines are edges of the roadmap, okay, the graph. And these vertices are the nodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. And after the start point and goal point are specified in a particular query, then start point and goal point are also included in the roadmap, and therefore the visible other visible nodes of the roadmap are connected through new edges. So this will be a new edge, this will be a new edge, this will be a new edge. For the goal, similarly, this connection, and this connection will be made newly. Okay. So now you have the full connection. Okay, full roadmap, including the start and goal points. And in that, the shortest path planning algorithm for a graph, the graph search algorithm, typically would give you this path, this, this. And you can show that it is the shortest path possible between this start and this goal, which will not try to pass through any obstacle. Okay. Now this is visibility graph, and you can see that you can see why it is applicable only for 2D configuration spaces. Okay. Because in the 3D, think of a matchbox, one point above and one point below. Uh, Typically, using only vertices, you will not be able to find out shortest path all the time. And if you don't find shortest path, then it's not much fun for visibility graph. Okay. So now we start arguing that this visibility graph has too many edges. All these edges are perhaps not necessary. For example, consider this edge. Nobody ever will need to take this road. Okay. Because you ask, if the guy is starting from somewhere here, okay, then you ask, he is going to this point, but where does he really want to go finally? Okay, either somewhere on this side or somewhere on this side. If he wants to go on this side, then why is he coming to this point and then going there? He can directly go, no? Similarly on this side. Similarly, nobody ever will need to take this edge. Okay, connecting this vertex and this vertex. You ask, from where does he have to come and where finally he has to go? If he says that he has to come from here and go here, then he can connect it directly. There is no point in going to this corner, then this corner, and then coming back. Connect it straight. If he wants to go from here to somewhere here, then also you can go straight. No? Right? If you want to go from this side to this side, then also you can connect directly. There is no point in going zigzag, right? So this edge will not be needed. This edge will not be needed. This edge will never be needed. And there are lots and lots of edges which will never be needed by no user. Have you seen a road on which nobody moves, nobody goes? because everybody feels that a shorter path he gets through a detour. I mean, by some other way. Okay, this road nobody takes. So why have them? So in the visibility graph, the generalized definition that any 2 points which are visible from each other we connect by an edge was unnecessarily lavish. And that means that your graph is unnecessarily loaded with too many edges. And the graph search algorithm has to operate combinatorially over so many edges. Many of them are useless. Bad idea, right? So from this observation, you talk of reduced visibility graph. So not all edges of the visibility graph are included in reduced visibility graph. You don't keep some of the edges. Two kinds of edges are actually kept. One kind is called supporting edges. The other kind is called separating edges. For a supporting edge, obstacle at that end as well as obstacle at this end are both on the same side. So that means the edge is actually supporting both ends. Okay. Separating edge is an edge in which obstacle at one end of the edge is completely on one side, obstacle at the other end is completely on the other side. So this edge separates the two obstacles. In the previous example, if we make some of the edges as red, then you will find that those red ones are neither supporting edge nor separating edge. You see, this green edge is a supporting edge because obstacle at this end is on the lower side of the edge, obstacle at this end is also on the lower side of the edge. Okay, so both on the same side of the edge, and therefore this is a supporting edge. On the other hand, this long green edge is a separating edge because obstacle at this end is completely on the left side, obstacle at this end is completely on the right side. So all these supporting edges and separating edges are important. Only those will be kept. And you see, you can immediately show who needs this road. Somebody who lives here wants to go here. He will need this road. Okay? Because from here, he will come to this point, then to this point, and then like this. And you see who needs this? Somebody who lives here and wants to go here. So he has to come to this corner, turn the corner, then come here, turn another corner, and come like this. So this person will need this route. So this is a separating edge. So only supporting edges and separating edges are needed as roads by somebody or the other. Okay. This red one is not supporting or separating because at this end the obstacle is on both sides, and this therefore this node, this edge will be useless. Okay. So similarly, other red ones, this red one also, at this end, obstacle is partly on this side, partly on that side. Yeah? So it is not completely on one side. So this also, this red one, here the obstacle is spread over both sides. So this also will be useless edge. So all those edges which are neither separating edge nor supporting edge, they are not kept in the reduced visibility graph. So the reduced visibility graph will look like this. Much less clutter. That means the graph will be much smaller. The search will be faster. Okay. So this is basically in a way the same thing as visibility graph, a little more efficient. Then we have something called the generalized Coronary diagram. Okay. And here you basically try to define this also operates on only 2D space. So you try to define a retraction of Q free to a set of connected curves, which is the generalized Coronary diagram. What is a retraction? Retraction is kind of mapping from a space of higher dimension to a space in the lower dimension, which sort of constitutes the backbone. You see here the green set of curves is the backbone of the entire Q free here. This is a big obstacle, this is a big obstacle. Okay. So here you want to set a mapping from Q free to this set of curves. So that for every point in the Q free, there is an image on the set of curves green. Okay. That is basically to find the first or the third segment of the path. Okay. The middle segment, the major segment, will be found through the graph search. Now, the visibility graph kind of plan was typically like a town planning problem, where you have important locations which you want connected by good roads. So in a town, there are important locations like school, hospital, college, market, town hall, and so on. And you try to connect these important points through major roads. Okay. On the way, other things get connected. Generalized Voronoi diagram, on the other hand, is like making highways. Okay. Here there is a big bunch of villages. Here there is a big bunch of villages. So when you want to make the network of highways in the state or district, then you try to ensure that the highways are not through the village clusters, but they are as close to all the village clusters. And that is why you try to make this road just in between the two village clusters. This road between the boundary and this. Okay. This road between the boundary and this village cluster. And since the village cluster is, the geography of the village cluster is going like this, so that is why the road turns and so on. Okay. Now, the logic of this generalized Voronoi diagram is to make paths maintain equal clearance from all the obstacles and also the boundary. Okay, so this is a boundary, outer boundary. This is an obstacle boundary. Okay, so equidistant point will have its locus, which is the angle bisector of the angle formed by this line and this line. So this is the angle bisector. But here the village cluster ends. Okay. So after that, you will ask for the locus of a point which is equidistant from this corner and this. And the locus of a point equidistant from a point and a line is parabolic. So it will go along this parabolic curve. Okay. And then between these two lines, it is again the angle bisector. Okay. And so on. Between 2 points, if on this side also a vertex faces, on that side also a vertex faces, then between 2 points, it will be the perpendicular bisector of the line segment. So these three things, point facing, perpendicular bisector of the line segment, line facing, angle bisector, and point line facing, that will have the parabolic segment between the two. That will be equidistant. And such segments, sometimes from the angle bisector to the parabolic, or angle bisector, or from the perpendicular bisector to the parabolic, turns smoothly, and sometimes three of such segments connect at a junction. Okay. Because you see, this is a junction where you have this angle bisector and this parabola between this vertex and this line, and this parabola between this vertex and this line. So three entities are operating at this junction. These three edges, and this edge is between this and this edge is between this and this edge is between this and this. So AB is one connection, BC is another connection, CA is another connection, and these three are joining at the junction. So such way you will have junctions. So for example, from here to here it goes smoothly. Okay, changes over from one curve to another. So this is a parabolic segment. Okay, between this vertex and this line, then linear segment between two lines, then again parabolic segment between this vertex and this line, then again linear segment between these two lines, then again parabolic segment between this vertex and this line, and so on. And here it connects where this parabolic segment between this vertex and this line, this parabolic segment between this vertex and this line, and this little linear segment, or this little linear segment between this and this, they intersect, they join. So like this, you can build the generalized Coronary diagram. Why it is generalized? Because if each obstacle were a single point, then in such a situation, what you would get, that is the original definition of Coronary diagram, which is a celebrated topic in computer science literature. Okay, so the GVD, generalized Coronary diagram, V, this set of curves of Q free, is a set of points from Q free, each point of the set at equal distance from both of its nearest C obstacles, boundaries. And every point in Q will have an image in this V, that is on these curves. And then the path planning goes as usual: start point given, goal point given, and then you get a point from the image that you get from here direct to here, closest point here, and this little thing will be the first part of the path, Q start to Q start prime, and then from Q start prime to Q goal prime, you will go along the established roadmap, and then from Q goal prime to Q2, you will again find by the third segment, in which basically you will map Q2 to this point and connect that as take that as the third segment. So this is the way generalized Coronary diagram works. And now the last method in the roadmap method category, we will take as the silhouette method. And this is actually a very fertile method because it is actually applicable on configuration spaces of arbitrary dimensions. So as we outline the method, along with that we will go on seeing a trivial example. Okay. So in an n-dimensional configuration space, you take an n-1 dimensional hyperplane, okay, like this, and sweep it through the C space. Okay, so this is the hyperplane, this one, this is a slice, and this is the direction of its sweep. Okay. So n-1 dimensional hyperplane, so only one dimension remains, so you sweep along that direction. Okay. So call it xi direction, and so as you cut the configuration space with this as the knife cut, you get slice, 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 and so on, different planar segments which are parallel. Now in every slice you note down the extreme point, and On in successive slices, as you get the extreme points, go on connecting them. As you go on connecting them, after a little while, you will get, extreme points. Extreme points. So extreme points will give you this curve and this curve. Okay, one extreme here, another extreme here. Like this, you go on connecting them. After you come till this point, this curve will grow till this point. This curve will grow till this point, and so on. So the set of the marked points constitute the silhouette curves. This will become the silhouette curves. Silhouette curve. So at the end of the deal, if you follow this practice, then you will actually get three silhouette curves. One outer boundary, one this obstacle boundary, and one this obstacle boundary. Correct? And this is why it is called silhouette method, because in very faint light, okay, in the night, for example, when you look at somebody's window, don't do that, that's a bad thing. Okay. But if you look at somebody's window, the inside light of the room is not on, and the person is standing near the window, you don't recognize her, but you recognize her outline. Okay. So that outline is the silhouette. And if a cat is standing there at the window, then you will recognize the cat roughly, but you might get a little confused between the cat and the dog by seeing only the silhouette. Okay, so that is why this is called silhouette method, because basically you are building the silhouettes of the obstacles and silhouette of the overall boundary also. Okay. Now there is a problem. This is not roadmap enough. This is not graph enough, because the three silhouette curves that we have got are not connected. You need to connect them. And here comes the beauty of the silhouette method. You see, through this, in this slice, you must have got two extreme points. In this slice, however, there will be four extreme points. Cut, 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 cut. Along this slice, there will be six extreme points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, the slice in between where the changeover took, there it will be odd number of extreme points, because two extreme points would merge and then disappear. Say this is four cuts, four extreme points. This is two extreme points. In between, there is a slice in which out of the four extreme points of this, two of them merge together. Further on the left side, those two disappear. Complex. Okay? So such slices where the changeover takes place, such slices are called critical slices. And at that critical slice, at each of the critical slices, now you see, I have shown you the critical slices by the dashed lines. Okay. So Q start and Q goal are also called among the extreme points. Okay. Now, along the critical slices, you do something more. Okay. What you do? Slices at which the number of silhouette curves changes, they are called critical slices. And at each critical slice, you make a recursive call to the same algorithm with the slice itself, as the C space. So as along your sweep, you proceed till this slice. The moment you find that this is a critical slice, because there are three extremes, okay, three extreme points, and you say, oh, this is a critical slice. So now, for the time being, I halt at my onward march, and this slice itself I take and call the same algorithm recursion once for an n-dimensional reduced, n-1 dimensional reduced space. Okay, that slice cross section, itself you pose as a new problem and open another loop inside. Okay, so that is the way recursion works. Okay? So in that you do the similar things once more. Okay, and in that also, if some critical slice appears, you do in one more down, n-2 dimensional, and at the end, finally at some point, the recursion ends, because finally you reach a one-dimensional slice in which the slice itself is the silhouette. And like that, in that case, this will get connected. Okay. So at that point, these connections get made, and now this becomes a complete network through finding silhouettes in the n-dimensional space, then in n-1 dimensional spaces, in the critical slices, and then n-2, then n-3, and so on. Finally, when you reach like that one-dimensional slice, then the complete slice is the silhouette. That is a line segment. And then you come out in the recursion, and then again proceed. So this is how on the way you build everything. And then once that is done, then you are ready with your roadmap, and any query from say this start to this goal will give you a path which is funnily like this, like this, like this, like this, because it has to go along the roadmap. So it goes along the roadmap like this. Now, is this a very funny path? Because something which you could connect like this, you are connecting like this, because that is how your roads go. In fact, this may sound very funny, but in one kind of application in modern life, this is the way you actually plan the path. When in a huge metropolitan city, for example, Bangalore, which is known for its um, traffic issues, you want to go, you take a taxi or auto from your house to somebody else's house at some other distant part of the city, then quite often the taxi driver takes you first to the ring road, then along the ring road covers the major distance, and then after that again enters the city. Though geometrically there would be a path possible which is shorter, but the actual cost which is important, time and fuel, okay, that may cost less here, because along this path most of the time he will be stopping at the crowd, stopping in the crowd. So this is how silhouette method works. And even in problems where the shortest path would be better compared to this, the silhouette method has one very good use, because there are methods which can give you a short optimized path if you can seed the algorithm with some path which is at least feasible. And in higher dimensional space, to start with a feasible path itself is actually a big problem. And in such situations, silhouette method offers you a way to plan a feasible path to start with, which can be optimized later. There are such optimization methods which we will discuss somewhere. Okay. So this is the point at which we stop in the first lecture. In the second lecture of the couple, I will consider the rest of the topics. We will handle the rest of the topics. Okay. Thank you.